Welcome back to Rehab Renegade. We've had a good question that keeps coming up lately, and it's something that I think is worth addressing. So it's, how do I know I'm not stretching something that's not meant to be stretched, right? So how do I know I'm lengthening something that's not supposed to be lengthened? And that is a good question. A lot of times we do have muscles that are stuck short, and we have muscles that are stuck long. And if you get in the right hands, we can kind of balance that out in an effort to create balance or alignment in the body, with the hope that that's going to either help with performance or in pain reduction. So what you'll see on the board is that we have, on this right side is a pelvis that's tilted forward. On this other side, we have a pelvis that's tilted backward. So what you see in the pelvis that's tilted forward, right, is that these muscles in the front are actually shortened. If this pelvis is tilted forward, the muscles in the back are actually lengthened. So feel free to pause this if you really need to process that. You know, I've had to go through this multiple times myself. This other side, it's tipped backwards or posteriorly rotated. So what you'll see is actually the muscles on this side are short and the muscles on this side are lengthened, okay? So what's funny is in a pelvis that's actually tipped backward, right, what we'll see is the hip is actually, and this is confusing, the hip is actually in a little bit more hip extension right now. So we actually don't expect to see you get as much hip extension in a pelvis that's tipped backward. Even though the muscle on the front is lengthened, it's already long, I don't expect you to get as much hip extension because the way that this pelvis is tilted has put this femur or bone in a little bit of hip extension. So instead of being here when this tips backwards, it's almost like the bone is actually set here. Right? In a pelvis that's tipped forward, you're actually in a little bit of hip flexion, so it's almost like the bone is actually sitting out here. These muscles get short when this femur is kind of set back in the joint. Now the muscles on the back side are short. Okay? So how would we address this? There's a lot of different ways, but one is, right, if you are foam rolling, right, the pelvis is tipped forward, we would actually want to try to lengthen these tissues or raise them. So when you're foam rolling, you can actually try to roll the foam roll upward toward the body instead of rolling downward. Is this super important? Probably not. A lot of people would make an argument that we're being too specific, but like in our treatments, we do try to address the tissues this way. So on the back side, right, these are actually lengthened. So if you're rolling the glutes, like working in a downward fashion might actually be more beneficial. On this side, a pelvis that's tipped backward, where this side is shortened, you might actually want to roll in a way that's more upward, that would lengthen or raise these tissues, kind of setting the pelvis back in that position. On this side, where the tissue is actually lengthened, we might want to try to drop it. So you might want to work into the front of the hip, down into the quad, in a more downward type motion, right, to try to tip that pelvis back forward. Okay, so in terms of exercises, right, if you have a pelvis that's tipped forward, we'd actually want to stretch the front. Okay, so that's where doing a hip flexor stretch, right, a couch stretch, wall stretch, whatever, could be more beneficial. We want to tighten the back, right? So if you've ever seen a glute bridge laying on the table, this is where you might try to squeeze the glutes and tip the pelvis backward. On the other end here, right, we have a pelvis that's tipped backward. These tissues are a little bit shortened. The ones on the front are a little bit lengthened. So do we really want to lengthen the ones on the front? Probably not. If you stretch them, right, it might kind of help loosen up the stiffness in the tissue because it's stuck long, but we actually don't need to provide length here. We want to actually shorten this, okay? So what you could do is, sitting on a table, right, you might straighten the knee and squeeze the quad. So as I'm straightening the knee, I'm tightening the hip flexor, the quad, and that's tipping my pelvis forward while I'm actually providing length to the back side. Okay, so on the back side, right, we're actually trying to lengthen these tissues. So this is a good one that catches both. You're sitting down, squeezing the quad, right, raise the hip a little bit, straighten, tighten up. You'll get some length on the back side, and you'll get some shortness on the front side. All right, I hope that helps clear up some confusion. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. Have a good one.